Shirley Harris Slaughter. She's going to do a presentation of a book that she is the author um, of Our Lady of Victory, the Saga of African American Catholic Community.
Thank you for having me. Melvin brought me into this. He was telling everybody that I wrote this book. He bought a copy and read it, and he has even gone on some of the events with me. He and I were part of this story that I'm about to tell you. We grew up in this Catholic community. It was called, the church was called Our Lady of Victory. They had a school behind it, and after about 1982, they closed the doors forever. And I kept saying to myself over the years, somebody needs to do a story on the pioneers who started this church, because I think they did a wonderful job, because we got a good education and we had a good Catholic experience. And so the thing that I wanted, that I thought, I kept saying, why doesn't somebody do the story? I didn't know that it was going to be me. I started working at a Catholic church on the east side of Detroit as a second career, and while there, I found out that they had just wiped the history out, as they do with all black history. Now, this is just a black Catholic history, but there's a lot of white Catholics, but there's not a lot of black Catholics. So that history was about to get wiped out like every other history. And when I found that out, I said, no way, it's not going to happen. Something's going to have to change. So I called the Archdiocese to find out if they had anything down there. They said they didn't. Why don't you get something down here? Well, they shouldn't have said that, because that's exactly how I felt at that point, that it was up to me to do it, not waiting for someone else. And that's the way most people are always waiting for someone else to do something. But we're all God's creatures. It's up to us. We're all special. Whatever we have to offer, that's what we should present, and we should embrace it. So when I found out that this needed to be done, I felt that it was up to me to do it. And I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know that I was a writer, but I had something to say. So I knew that I had to go around and start interviewing people. I didn't want to do that. It took me a year to get to that part. I knew I had to go dig up files somewhere, and the priest that I was working with told me to go to Sacred Heart Seminary, that I would find some files there. I couldn't figure out why Sacred Heart Seminary, but when I finally got there, there was a whole microfiche, if any of you ever heard the term microfiche, of files down there. And I started going through them, started seeing things in there, trying to find something on Our Lady of Victory. I found little blurbs of paragraphs, but not much else. But most of the time, when they build new schools and churches, they put an article in the Michigan Catholic, which is the Catholic newspaper that's sent to all the parishes around the state every Sunday. This comes out. They also send out a bulletin. Are there any Catholics in this room? So you know they have these newsletters that come out. These newsletters that come out every Sunday. Well, those are history papers. Only I didn't think of it at the time that I found out that I had to start digging up history. So I went down to the Sacred Heart Seminary and started copying things that were relevant to this particular church, trying to find out information. Then I finally got a chance to get into the files at Our Lady of Victory, which had been moved over to a new church called Presentation. So they merged the church, Presentation, Our Lady of Victory, and the files were there. This priest that was in there at the time, who was responsible for the first closing of Our Lady of Victory, came in for a 3-parish cluster. He had to service 3 parishes. So you're not going to do a very good job when you have to do that. So I asked him if I could go through the files and take some of them home. He wouldn't let me. So when this deacon came in and found out what I was trying to do, he said, look, you can take them home, just get them back here. So I would sneak them out of there, take the files home, do my little, take out what I need and sneak them back in. And then he gave me a whole box of pictures you know, and pictures are worth 1,000 words. Those pictures were priceless, and I was up all night looking at these pictures. There were pictures of Melvin when he was a little boy in some of those class photos. There were Halloween parties, there were Christmas parties, pictures of myself, and it was just priceless to find these. So I started scanning them through my computer to the point that I broke down my computer. It just couldn't take it no more, all the work that I was giving it. But I was able to scan them, and then my nephew came along and helped me get them into an acceptable form to go into the books, the pictures. So, and then I had to go down I had to do a personal interview. I didn't want to do it. Did not want to do it. Don't want to talk to people. I had a camera, and I called, someone directed me to a woman by the name of Almeda White. Her maiden name was Carew, and her family had a presence at Our Lady of Victory in the early years. So they told me to talk to her. So we went down to Sacred Heart Seminary because she stayed down there. She was always taking classes. And I just put the recorder on and let her talk. Now, what was I going to do with this recording after all of this talking was over? I said, God, please show me how to put this on paper, put this down. First, I just typed everything that it was said. And then I ended up using her voice throughout the book. It actually changed the direction of the book because she came up with things that you can't even find in a book. This is oral history. So I was able to put it all together. And then how my story got in there was my editor was editing the book, and she said, why don't you tell your story? Well, at that point, I wasn't looking at it as something that I needed to tell my story. I was trying to tell their story, and I didn't think my story was relevant. Turns out everybody liked my story better than anybody else's. So that story is the first chapter of this book called A Personal Perspective. And I have pictures, I have the story of my family, I have all of my siblings listed, I have my parents, I have their stories, just brief snippets of their lives and how it played into all of our lives, and my brother and myself and my entire family, and how this Catholic Church influenced me in a positive way. The only negative was when we came into the faith and started going to Catholic school. I came from a public school to Catholic. So they put us back a grade. And I was so humiliated by that experience. I wouldn't talk to anybody about it, and I didn't talk to anybody about it for years. It wasn't until I wrote this book that all of these feelings poured out, and I started to tell the whole story. And then I found out other people had experienced the same thing. It wasn't just me. But when you don't talk and when you don't do the research, you don't know that we're all going through this together. I didn't know that this church was being closed down like 3 or 4 other black Catholic churches in the city of Detroit were being closed down. And it was a systematic closing because of the policies of the Archdiocese of Detroit. They did not give us a permanent priest. We had a missionary priest, which is fine, that's okay. But why didn't they groom black priests to take over our parish like they had the German priests in the German church? They had the Irish priests in the Irish church. They had the Polish priests in the Polish church. So why didn't they have the black priests in the black church? That they didn't have. And it caused this church not to be able to thrive. So I learned all of this as I was doing the research. And at first I got kind of angry, and my voice of anger was in the manuscript. And when this priest saw the manuscript, he said, the story is fascinating, but I can't promote it because it's negative, and they had just come off that sex scandal in the Catholic Church. So he practically pushed me out of the office. I was so shaken up, I decided I wasn't going to continue until this white deacon friend of mine told me, this is your story, you need to go ahead and do it. And then my husband gave me words of encouragement, and I went ahead and continued. But when people do that, it really discourages you because they don't want you to tell the truth. And they program all of us to not tell the truth, to not even see the truth when it's hitting us in the face. And we all play this game of not knowing when the insults are hurled right in our face. We just pretend like it's not there and internalize it on ourselves. So my girlfriend said, well, I'm going to have your back. You know, you go out and you do this, and I got your back. And so I did it, and the deacon said, you might have some people, you might find out who your friends are. throughout when this book comes out. So just be prepared for it. Well, I did find out who my friends were and who weren't my friends, because some people were jealous of the fact that I actually did this, and some people are jealous of your success. Some people were very happy, and the ones that were rooting for me were the ones that cared about me. And so here I am today, going around trying to spread the word. And guess what? The Detroit Public Library found this book, called me down. I did a presentation for them, and they are supporting me through the library system along with other authors. They look for local authors who have regional stories to tell that shares the flavor of Detroit. They like those kind of books, and they especially like this kind because it's a history, it's a true history, but it's also a story, narrative. It's called narrative history. I didn't know what narrative history was. I didn't, because usually you have to go to school to do this kind of book. But this came from my heart. This was an inspiration, and I wrote it. It just evolved into this. And so anyway, the Detroit Public Libraries. How many have heard of the Burton Historical Collection in the Detroit Public Library? You've heard of the Burton Historical Collection? It's a genealogical department that deals with looking up your roots, finding out your heritage, and those kinds of things. Well, this book is kind of in that category because it talks about history from my perspective of growing up in a Catholic community. And so they looked at it as a narrative history. I never would have come up with that term, but I only discovered this a couple of days ago that this is a narrative history. And some people didn't go to school to write these kinds of books, but I just wrote it, and it turned out to be quite an interesting story. And it also gives the history. I found out I was surrounded by historical people. How many of you have heard of Judge Damon Key? Well, his brother, Luther Key, was a prominent black Catholic back in the early turn of the 20th century. And he used to go around looking up properties for the Archdiocese of Detroit so that they could build churches and schools. And he did that. He put his kids in Catholic school. They used to go to St. Agnes, which is now Martyrs of the Uganda, which finally closed down. That's where his kids went to school. But he played a role in my church community because he started this Black Catholic organization called the Knights and Ladies of St. Peter Claver. That's a national organization, and he was trying to start a chapter here in Detroit. Our Lady of Victory was the headquarters, and it started in 1949. My mother became a part of that organization in the 70s. I came into it in 1998, and I've been with them for 12 years. I thought it was a wonderful organization, Catholic organization. They encourage Catholicism. They encourage you to live your faith, like faith in your community, and to be a part of a solution in your community. So I learned so much about them that I added a chapter of them in this book because I felt it was so relevant to the story of this Catholic community. They've torn down the school. All we have left is what's in this book. The church is gone. They merged as a presentation, and no one from presentation knew anything about Our Lady of Victory. So I felt it was high time that they did know that this community once existed, and let's try to preserve it in the history books. And that concludes this. Is there any questions for anybody? Did anybody understand what I was saying? Yeah.
I was inspired to watch the book.
Pardon me?
I was inspired to watch the book.
What inspired you?
Oh, just trying to get that history because we were when I started working at that Catholic church, I found out that they had lost the history, just wiped it out. So I said, no, this cannot happen because I did have a church I went to. I did have a school that I've gone to. And now it's like it never existed. And I was outraged by that. So I felt that it was up to me to get this story out here. Another one of our histories that we lose. And if you don't know where you've been, you don't know where you're going. And white people have their history. They have all of their history. They're very proud of it. We have to scratch and find whatever history we can find, even in our own personal families. So I joined the Genealogical Society because they found me in this book, and I thought, well, I didn't even know they existed. So I'm going to be looking at my family history from this experience. of them finding me. And also I've been trying to find my niche market, and this is one of them. The Genealogical Society is one of the markets that would work with this sort of book. Because you can't sell it to everybody, because everybody's not gonna get it. But if you're into history, you're into learning who you are, this kind of book helps you to do that. Any other questions? Oh, go ahead.
Were you surprised at the reaction from the Catholic Church when you started questioning them about why they did not wound the African American young priest to the African?
Well, they don't even admit to that. But what I did was I talked to a couple of people that were involved in the church during that time. One of them was the director of the Office of Black Catholic Affairs. His name is Garland Jaggers. He said that there were like 15 or 20 boys in a 10-year period in the 60s that went into the seminary, and every one of them were rejected. And I was pissed when I heard that. But it explains why we don't have any priests. That we can't, and if you don't have a priest, you can't lead a community of followers into the faith. And so I just think it was an effort to just not let that happen, because we did have a very large Black Catholic community that was bulging at the seams during the early part of the last century. And then it started to taper off. You don't have any more generational Black Catholics anymore. I've run into people who went to the schools that never became Catholic. Well, in my church, they didn't force you to become Catholic, but you generally did, because your kids were going to the school. You wanted to be a part of that life. So most of the parents came in, took instruction, and became Catholics. The whole families became Catholic. And this went on for decades in this particular church. But now there's nothing at all. And the diocese, all they can see is closing churches and schools. People still need a decent education. And I don't think somebody will mind becoming a Catholic if that's what it takes to get their children into a decent education and have a decent life. Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, what's your name?
Shirley.
Okay, my name is Secretary.
Just
Thank you.
Go ahead. Who else? Oh,
Is it still declining?
yes, the numbers are still declining. There's so many folks that don't even know what Catholicism is, and if there's a bunch of you sitting right in this room probably have never even been exposed to it. And I see young children, they'll come up to me. When I was working at this Catholic church, we had a little after-school program that we put on, that we worked with a couple of other Protestant churches in the community. It was federal grants, and we were doing an after-school program teaching, mentoring to these kids. And they would come into the rectory. Someone had never been inside of a rectory before. They looked around like they were looking at a ghost. They didn't know there were any Black Catholics. Who are you? And it was like, it was sad that they don't know this faith. They don't know who we are or what we've been to this community. But it's been a positive force in the community for years. So my goal is just to keep the word out there, just to keep a thorn in the archdiocese's side. Go ahead.
I'm just curious, nowadays, do you know how many Catholic churches are up in the city?
Well, you have St. Cecilia, you have Sacred Heart, which is a huge Catholic church. That's a whole Catholic history that I also have in the book of their history, but they are the largest Black Catholic community. They used to have a school, but when they built that freeway, they tore the school down, and they have this one priest that's been there forever. The diocese has been trying to remove him forever, and he refuses to go. I mean, in the white community, you had priests for 10, 15, 20 years. When I left my little church and went out to high school, that priest was in that church for 20 years. My priest had left before I came out of grade school. That's my reality, and so I came into a whole new reality, and it was like a culture shock to me to see this, because I'm thinking, well, why didn't we have our priest very long? How come he didn't look like us? Like these priests look like their members. So it makes a difference. And they the ones that came up with this ethnic separation of the races. They came up with it. So why not give the Black church the same thing you were giving the other ethnic groups? That same equal playing field. So today, you don't see very many Catholics. Yes.
how long ago have you been since you wrote the book?
The book came out in 2007.
Okay.
And I was beating my brains out before then, trying to get it launched. I had pre-orders, people were waiting on their book, and the book hadn't come, and I was getting upset, and I didn't want anybody editing the book, cause I have certain standards, and I wanted to make sure that industry standards were there for, this book, so that it wouldn't be blown out of the water once it did launch. So so a priest friend of mine sent me to a publishing company called iUniverse, which is it's called a print-on-demand company, and it's for new authors who can't get into the big publishing houses and get a big check and say, here, write your book and we're gonna help them. We don't get that. So I wanna get this out there, and I didn't wanna go that route and have to go and be rejected. So I decided to do it on my own and get it out there. Yes, ma'am.
Back during the sixties, during the riot, right outside of Sacred Heart Seminary, they have, the statue of Jesus, and I know during the riots, that statue was painted black.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know if that's in the book or not.
No, I
Oh,
didn't
it's
know
not
about
in there?
that.
Oh, okay, well, I'm gonna leave that
Elmina
alone.
didn't tell me that
And I
she
was wondering why they never converted it back to the original
Where
color.
is it at
Right.
now? Is
It's
it-
right outside the seminary.
The seminary on Chicago
On
Boulevard.
Chicago.
I'm thinking of Sacred Heart's Church.
Oh, no,
There's
no,
a
no.
Sacred Heart Church by Eastern Market.
No, seminary. Yeah.
Okay, I have to check that out when next time I'm
Oh,
up there.
okay, then I was just wondering.
Cause I
you know,
didn't
if it
even
was-
notice it. I just go in and zip back
Right,
out.
right, yeah. It was painted during the riot.
As long as it was done, you know, in a good job or run out with it, you know, as long as it was in the line.
Well, seeing that during that time, going back a few years before a few of you were born, because there was so much turmoil, in the city of Detroit, and it was painted during a time, of unrest in the city, and I was wondering if there was any.
Well, I don't have that information, but one thing I noticed when I was at my church as a younger person coming up, there were two statues. On one side was the Virgin Mary statue, and on the other side was the statue of Saint Martin de Porres, who is a black saint. That stood out to me, this black statue, because all you ever seen was a white statue. So I really related to that Saint Martin de Porres, and I kept looking for black saints and stuff. Even though I was a little girl, but you know the difference even then. I noticed blacks were being painted a certain way, and I couldn't understand that, and that we weren't the dominant race. Only I didn't know that coming up in the black community. It wasn't until I started going on field trips that I realized that we were just a minority in a pool of a lot of Catholics, and we were just surrounded by mostly the whites. And I thought there were a lot of black Catholics in my little world. That was all I knew. So I was very sheltered. And Melvin, he was born. He was a little toddler when he got baptized, because we all got baptized together, you know, in the faith. We all came in at the same time.
Do it one more time.
So is there any other questions? Yes.
Yes, back in the, 60s, I was at school, I was raised as baptized and confirmed as Roman Catholic.
Oh, okay.
But when I grew up like in the 80s, I went to another phase,
Mm-hmm.
baptism, and the church I here is Brother Charles Ellis III, is on the Apostolic Baptist faith. Marking, I don't think about returning back to Roman Catholic. What is the truth returning to Apostolic Baptist Church back to Roman Catholic? What is the truth? Is there some procedure you're supposed to do? What?
Well, you just go back, whatever the church of your choice is, you go in and talk to the priest and get enrolled, get registered.
Okay.
And they'll have your name on the registration to get your any information that comes out of the church will come to you, to the address. And then you might wanna renew your baptismal.
Yeah.
Maybe you wanna, just, once you start back and start, learning the faith again and taking instructions, then you can get back into receiving communion. You have to talk to your priest about that.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I grew up Catholic. I went to a Catholic school for 8 years, and we were taught mainly by nuns.
We were too.
Were you?
But they were black nuns out of Baltimore, which was another historical event that was going on, and we didn't know we were surrounded by all this history. So I ended up doing the story of them in the book. And I was amazed that the founder her name was Sister Teresa Maxey. She was biracial and considered a troublemaker by the diocese. She started IHM after she saw that the Oblate Sisters of Providence didn't look like they were gonna get any support. Those were the nuns that taught us, but of course they survived. But Sister Maxey's went to Monroe, started IHM, and nobody knew she was a black nun. She also started Marygrove College. Her name is on the apartment buildings, the Teresa Maxey buildings, if anybody's heard of that. Her name is in those buildings, it's on that building, and I started learning that history. See, that's history you don't know about, so I got all of that in the book. I said, oh my God, look, all of this history that we don't understand, and taking our place in some of this history. And Immaculata High School was part of that whole system that she helped to start.
Did the nuns live on site, or?
The black nuns stayed on site. They had a home for them behind the church on Eileen Street. The church was situated on West 8 Mile, and then there was Washburn, Eileen. The priestess' quarters was behind the church, and the school was built behind that. All of that's gone except for the church now. Like it never happened. Can you imagine that? So I was so glad that I did this book, because they can't take this away.
Right.
And I want to keep on talking until it gets out there. So like I said, the Detroit Public Library found me. They like what I'm doing, and they want me to come and speak next year at their genealogical society. So I'll be speaking next year in April to them. And then I may be speaking at their annual family festival in a breakout session, because it's a narrative history. But they're working on that. So the word is getting out, so hopefully, and I was never a history person, but I love history and I love old buildings. So I tried to save the train station when I went back to school to get my college degree. Ended up in all the papers, and I took that down to the Genealogical Society, and that's when they decided to put me, they wanted me to speak at the annual family festival on top of the Genealogical Society, Phil Hart Genealogical Society. Yes, ma'am.
Do the art, they want you to speak there?
No.
They don't want,
They want me to disappear.
Disappear.
They have my book down there in the archives. They could have promoted me through the diocese had they wanted to. They don't want to, so I don't even go there. I have to go around them to get the word out.
They want you quiet.
They just don't want me to say anything, because there's things in this book that they prefer not to remember. But to me, why not just say, okay, this happened, I'm sorry, let's see what we can do to fix it. Because Detroit still needs a Catholic presence here. And all that's here is the Archdiocese of Detroit Cathedral. That's there. All the churches have gone out to the suburbs. And I didn't realize that the Catholic Church was saying, on the one hand, don't leave, but on the other hand, they were selling these homes for these homes at bargain basement prices in the suburbs for the whites to move out to keep their ethnic purity. And they kept saying, on the one hand, you shouldn't do this, but on the other hand, they were selling the ads. So I saw the hypocrisy of that. If you're going to be true to whatever your belief is, right or wrong. And so that mixed signal doesn't help the case at all. So I'm not trying to knock the church. I hope that nobody thinks that I'm trying to do that. But sometimes when you're telling the history, it's not going to be pleasant. So I make no apologies for it. Just don't shoot me. I say that in the book too. Because that was like my disclaimer when I wrote this book. So you don't say, okay, let's get the guns out. So now the books they were expensive to produce, but I'm selling the paperbacks for $10 for this group today. They cost about $20, but I'm selling them for $10. And my hardcovers are a little bit more. I'm selling them for $20. They're $10 more than the paperbacks. So if anyone has the ability to get a book, I wish I could give them away, but I can't, because I can't. I'm operating in the red. I hope next year to be operating in the black. But Melvin invited me here, so I wanted to share this with you and let you understand that this is history that we need to be proud of, yes.
Do you have any more books on the horizon?
When I make some money, I think so. I got some books in my head. I wanna do my family, you know, I really wanna get into them, so I'm glad I joined the genealogy society. But, there's other stories in my head, and I haven't put them down on paper. You know, I didn't even know that I was a writer, but my sister Connie told me that I could write. Now, none of the teachers ever told me that. When I did essays, my mom helped me, so I got A's on the paper. My mother was very gifted. The Melvin, they're all gifted. Everybody was gifted in the family, and we didn't know it. We didn't make any money being gifted. My mother didn't make any money, but she was a cultured person. She taught us, we listened to opera, jazz, blues, every music you could think of, she had it in the home. So we had all of that mixed culture, you know, so it makes you adaptable. You don't say, oh, I don't like this, I don't like you. You're adaptable when you grow up like that. So, and my mother used to talk to us, she used to tell us stories. She used to choreograph dances for us to do. And when she could tell a story and have you about to climb out of your seat trying to get the rest of it, then she'll say, I'll tell you the rest tomorrow. You're going crazy because you want to hear the end of the story. It takes a gift to do that. And my mother was a great speaker. And I didn't know that I had any talents. But I had this story to tell, and it's in an easy to read style, very interesting. Everybody loves it when they read it, and they learn a lot about Detroit. And that's it. That's my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We at the clubhouse, thank you for coming out and sharing with us. We really appreciate it. And we want to give you a card in there to hopefully we will have more presentations and more opportunities for you to come and visit in the future.
Oh my God.
Thank you.
Nice. Oh my goodness.